Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We always try to make shows a little different, change the format, change the presentation, and I don't give opinions, etc. But we're going to do something very, very different today. In fact, we're going to ask our guest, who is well known, probably one of the most popular podcasts, Anthony Cumia, to be our guest today. And he's going to provide his views for us on a subject that is on the papers and the press and the media every day. And that's called Epstein. Everybody's wondering what's going on, what's really happening there. We're going to really take out of the discussion today the political ramifications, because it's not really about that. It's about whether or not this guy was killed or he committed suicide. It's the bottom line. As I was telling Anthony before we went on the show, the first thing that I thought of when I heard that he had supposedly committed suicide was, doesn't sound like that to me. And so he's going to talk about that today. And we know that both sides are looking to gain something out of this politically. In fact, much has been made of the fact that for 4 years that Biden was president, nothing was done. All of a sudden, it's got active. And some people are going to gain politically, economically, or otherwise, and others are not. So we're going to keep that out of the discussion. We're going to talk really about like this is a real case, like this is a real trial. I'm a former prosecutor, deputy district attorney, and criminal defense lawyer, and I've handled cases, including murder cases. And I'm going to give you some basic rules. It's called evidence. And Anthony's going to have to respond based on accepting these rules as a given. And one of the first questions people ask is this speculation? Is it circumstantial evidence? I'm going to tell you first basically what it is. Now, I specifically asked Anthony because he's going to represent all of you, because he's one of you, one of us. And the reality is his views really do matter, and they may make a difference in how you're thinking about it at the end of the day. So we're going to take this as though it was a regular criminal case. Of course, we don't know who's being prosecuted. So True. it's kind of like John Doe or Jane Doe, and we don't know a lot of facts. But the point is, let me just give you half a dozen or so rules of evidence. And so people know what judges do. We decide what the jury, if it's a jury trial, gets to hear and what it doesn't get to hear. A lot of times things are not allowed to be presented to the jury because it violates some rule of law. Other times we decide it comes in under some exception or whatever it may be. And that's our purpose of being there to begin with. So, among other things, of course. So let me just talk about speculation and I suppose its counterpart, which is circumstantial evidence. There's an enormous difference between the two. Now, we're hearing about a lot. There's a lot of speculation. So an example of speculation would be if I asked you how big my dining room table was in my house, you couldn't answer that question because you haven't been in my house. You'd have no idea. You'd have to be guessing. And that's called speculation. Circumstantial evidence is very different. And circumstantial evidence is the same as direct evidence, only the manner of proof is a little bit different. For example, you go to the refrigerator at 7 o'clock in the morning and you're going to have some toast with jam. And you're looking, there's a bottle of jam that's opened and you can see some of it's on the side and part of it is even on the door. And so you say, well, who took that? I didn't take that. So you go up the stairs to your son's bedroom. He's like 10 years old and he's sleeping. And you look at his face and he's got remnants of jam. And you look and there's a little tissue by the bed. It has a little jam on it too. That's called circumstantial evidence. You follow from A all the way to Z. And the difference in circumstantial evidence is if it's like a chain. If any of the links in the chain are not proven, it affects the ultimate outcome. And so there's a big difference between speculation circumstantial evidence. And we're going to talk about that. I'm going to stop talking in a minute. It's going to let Anthony respond. But I think it's important. We hear phrases like hearsay. Well, generally speaking, hearsay, which is an out-of-court statement made by a person not subject to cross-examination about the truth of a matter. But there's many, many, many exceptions to that rule, and we, as bench officers, have to decide whether the exceptions apply or not. But hearsay is deemed to be untrustworthy, and that's why you don't hear it. But you certainly hear a lot of it on social media right now. Everybody's talking about somebody else said something to somebody else about something else, and that is oftentimes viewed with distrust. Third is authentication. People bring documents and records and things, and sometimes they're fraudulent. They're made up, they're forgeries or whatever. And so there's a requirement that these documents meet certain evidentiary rules. One, of course, is called authentication. The presence or absence of a relevant, which means important, material issue, the evidence is gone. And there's a jury instruction, which we tell the jury at the end of the trial, that who controlled that evidence and its absence or non-presence should be considered. That's pretty serious rule to follow. Number 4, physical facts and the use of experts. Juries are often informed that the opinions of experts should be considered by them if it's on a subject that's not normally known by the public. And so you have to weigh what's called the credibility of these experts. Who hired them? What were they paid? How often do they testify, et cetera, et cetera? That's called credibility. So keep that in mind, Anthony, when we're talking about some of these people.
Yeah.
And it's basically the source of the information. And the physical part is going to play an important role in your evaluation of the ultimate facts here. And so with all of that in mind, applying all the rules that you now know, and with your worldly experience, which I know you have, what is your opinion as to the cause of Epstein's death? Was it murder or suicide?
Boy, what a question, Judge. First of all, thank you for having me back. I always enjoy our shows that we do together. And this is a tough one because, I mean, there's so many different things happening in this situation that you don't have in a criminal trial if a murder's been committed. We have a body, but we don't have a suspect. We have a few suspects actually, but that, of course, there isn't any real proof or evidence as to who might have done this if he indeed was murdered in his jail cell. So it's sort of backwards a little bit here. We're trying to figure out if he was indeed murdered without having a murderer. Now, as a layman, I think we all looked at what we saw on the internet and speculated, again, speculation, that there was something nefarious that happened to this man. The lead up to it, everybody talking about what an awful person he was, the powerful people that he had been tied to over the course of years, some of the most powerful people in the world, very influential people, news, Hollywood people, politicians, corporate executives. So the motive could be there. You have a motive of, let's keep this guy quiet. He has a lot of dirt on us, and we don't want that getting out. So I think a lot of people jump to the conclusion that, well, this must have happened. Was he suicidal? Did we see any evidence of him being suicidal? He was on suicide watch in the jail. Some of the people in charge didn't peek in on him as they were supposed to. There was some errors in the video. We're now hearing about some missing minutes. So all of this put together really does make you very suspect that this was a suicide and not something more notorious.
Well, I also want to mention what all cases are decided, both civil and criminal, on something called the burden of proof. In a criminal case, the prosecution has the burden of proof, what's called beyond a reasonable doubt. Civil cases are different. And it happens to be a burden in between, but that doesn't apply to
A
any.
propensity
Usually,
of truth.
well, conscious, it's basically clear and convincing, and it does apply to some things, but not others. But in this case, if there was to be a trial, the prosecutor would have to prove that the defendant, whoever that is, did what they're claiming he or she did, and support that opening, if you will, with evidence to support it. Now, you mentioned a couple of things, and of course, I had thought about some of those myself. And missing minutes. To me, that is a very, very, very substantial piece of information. And it caused the resignation of a president, talking about Nixon. He sure as hell didn't want to give up those tapes. And ultimately, he gave them up and resigned as a result. So, 3 minutes missing. Which 3 minutes were they? Well, as a prosecutor, you ask lots of questions, of course. So does the defense. But as a prosecutor, you want to know what time was missing, who had control of the tapes, why did they have control of the tapes, why was that particular 3 minutes missing? Was that the 3 minutes from the time you saw him without the towel, without the sheet around his neck, and you see the body sitting there? 3 minutes is a very, very long time to be missing. And so what was cut out of there? Sure would be demonstrative, wouldn't it? Let's assume that those 3 minutes were in there and it showed that somebody put the sheet around his neck and hung him. I mean, that would certainly answer the question, wouldn't it?
Right.
So what's on that 3 minutes is absolutely 100% essential. And in fact, there is a jury instruction that says if a party having control of a particular piece of evidence destroys it or it's gone or whatever, an inference can be drawn that what was in there would be prejudicial to that party destroying it. And that's what we tell that to the jury. And so the reality is those three missing meetings, really, I want to know where the outtakes are for that. Because they obviously was recorded. To make up a story right now, which is what I'm reading. Oh, the missing time is because we have to reboot the computer.
Right.
Bullshit, as they say. I mean, there's no. I saw an interview of a guy who's a computer expert. He says that did not happen. Those 3 minutes were taken out intentionally, and intention in most cases. Some cases don't require any intention. You're looking only at the mens rea. That's the equivalent of intention. The act itself is all that's needed. And so at this point, you sure as hell want to know the motivation behind why it was done and who did it, on whose instructions. That starts to sound, if you can make the connection.
Judge, I'd like to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
Was the scene processed as anything more than a suicide? Because we know if there's a suspected murder scene, that the evidence is collected. A lot of these things like video surveillance and any other evidence in that crime scene would be taken in and protected. There would be a chain of custody that would show who was in charge, who was in possession of these various pieces of evidence during the time between picking up this evidence and the trial, which seems to me to be a very important thing, especially in this case. And I don't recall hearing anything that this was processed as a murder scene. It seems like it was processed as, well, they already decided it was suicide, so they just kind of cleaned up, and that's all we're left with.
Well, I must tell you, we have in trials things that are called foundational issues. The admissibility of evidence is usually heard in what we call a 405 motion to decide whether it gets in or it doesn't get in. And one of the things that needs to be shown is the chain of custody, just like you said. And what was also interesting, and as a prosecutor, I can tell you that absolutely the crime scene is vital, because cases are lost because of the documents being altered. Things happen.
O.J. Simpson.
Well, you damn well know that we make sure that A to Z are covered. It's the total chain and who did what, when, and whatever. And that has to be presented to the judge to decide whether it's trustworthy enough so that it gets in, or some of the elements are missing. And that's
Right.
very, very important. I'll tell you what else is missing, from what I understand. And I haven't read transcripts or anything, just kind of relying on what I read and hear. And I watch all the stations different times, so I get different views. The reality is they have no photographs.
Mm.
I have never in my years, and I've handled many, many, many criminal cases, I have never seen a situation where the forensic people don't take pictures. They put a little square on the various spots on the floor.
Right. Yeah.
They damn well do that all the time. Why wasn't it done here?
Yeah. They seem to have just processed this as a suicide without any suspicion that something else might have happened here. And that really screws up any case if later on something comes out that this might have been a murder. They don't have the very necessary evidence that would have been collected if it was processed as anything more than just, oh, well, he offed himself, let's put him in a box and get him out of here.
But they do have circumstantial evidence on both sides. There's just a gap. And why is there a gap? And one side is going to point the finger at the other and say there's a gap because they took it out because of A, B, C, and D. That's argument. An argument is not evidence. And the other side is going to say just to the contrary. And to me, if I was a juror in this case, and I can't be a juror, so I'd like to, but it's not gonna. If I was,
Right.
I'd say to myself, the lack of photography, the lack of preservation of evidence, the lack of continuity, the immediate conclusion tells me a lot. And it's circumstantial, but it does go to the question of whether or not you can prove it by beyond a reasonable doubt. And so I find those factors to be extraordinarily important.
You know what though, Judge? We hear a lot of times we hear the term plausible deniability. You hear this all the time. I want to know how effective that is to a jury, because when you have something like this tape and this gap, and the explanation is, well, we use the same tape over and over since the 90s, which is ludicrous. But let's say they do that for some reason. 3 minutes of it at around midnight get erased, and then it takes up again for a new day at the beginning of the tape. Even though this sounds like a ridiculous excuse, there is an element of plausible deniability there. How effective is that with a jury? It
depends. There's a concept which I find very disturbing, actually. It's called jury nullification. That's a technical term that we use. It basically says no matter what we tell the jury and we read them instructions, sometimes it takes a while because there's so many different instructions. It's all the rules and what they can do and what they can't do, et cetera, et cetera. If they want to get a desired result, they hate the defendant or they love the defendant or whatever it may be, they don't pay attention to the rules. They just come back, not guilty. You never know until afterwards. In fact, it's very, very interesting. I'll tell a quick story. I was defending a guy in an arson case. Actually, I tried the case twice. First one was a hung jury. And we tried the second case, and the jury comes back not guilty. And I'm, of course, very excited. And I'm on the telephone. We had phones in the courthouses those days. And I call the office to, tell them great result that we had for this idiot client that I had. And the bottom line is the bailiff comes running down and says, the judge wants to see you. I said, why? Well, he just wants to see you. It's okay. So I go down there. I meet with the district attorney in chambers with the judge, who was a very nice man, by the way, a very legitimate guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, we have a problem. I said, what's the problem? He says, we talked to the jury afterwards, and they said there was 7 for guilty and 5 for not guilty.
Huh.
And they thought that they had to have all 12 in order to have it done, and that it couldn't be a hung jury. It had to be yes or no, and that's what they did. So they made a mistake. I said, well, that's too bad, but this is called double jeopardy. He's already been discharged.
Right.
This one is over. The judge, the DA says, I need the weekend to do research. I said, you could take more than the weekend. You could take forever because
this ain't going back, right?
You're toast. Anyway, we went back on the following morning, and he conceded that he could not be retried. And so juries do. The reason I'm telling the story is because juries do what juries want to do, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, sometimes I guess they blame it on the judge for not charging the jury properly and giving them the proper instructions. But yeah, I would assume the jury is a lot more volatile in what they'll take in and the way they'll disseminate it as per the rules than a judge would.
Well, you look at this P. Diddy trial, for example.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first things that came to my mind is you're getting 12 people plus the alternates in a basically urban community where you're going to get a mixture of peers on your jury. And the chances of getting 12 people who don't know who this guy is or haven't heard his word or loved watching it or whatever it may be was probably nil.
Right.
You're going to get somebody on that jury. All you need is one. So I was saying to myself, as much as this sounds, how much they glorify all the things that they allegedly said he did and made it as blatant as they could and used the press to do part of it, notwithstanding the early gag order. But the reality is they made it look really, really bad. And I said to myself, people used to ask me, what did I think? I never read the transcript, so I really couldn't give an opinion. But the reality was, I said to myself, and I told them the same thing. I said, if they like him, they love his music or whatever, he walks. And that's pretty much what happened.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean,
yeah. I was thinking
not the first time, by the way.
No. I was thinking the same thing. And it's just now made me think of this. Is it possible to have a trial that is just untriable because the defendant is so well known or has been so prejudiced by the media? And I mean, with the Epstein case, everyone has a very passionate opinion one way or the other about this case and whether he killed himself and whether there's a list and all the other things. I think it would be a very difficult task for an attorney and a judge and a jury to take it all in and not be biased in some way.
Well, there are remedies or mechanisms, what they call motions to change venue. That's for a world celebrity.
But where do you go?
There's a way you have to say you can have it someplace in Cheyenne, Wyoming, where maybe they're not listening to hip hop or whatever. But the reality is everybody's entitled to a trial. And if they're universally disliked, you have a difficult time if you're the defense lawyer trying to make it in. And that's what they did with Diddy. They said he's what he is, blah, 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 blah. And a good defense lawyer is going to try to distract or divert away from those kinds of issues and focus on you have a duty to blah, 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 and try to appeal to a juror's sense of what their obligation is. And that it is truly to be fair and follow the rules. In fact, one of the jury instructions is you have to follow the rules. Whether you like the rules or not, you got to follow the rules. And
it's funny. Lately, I've been watching a lot of mafia trials from the 80s and whatnot. And the defense attorneys had they were forced to tell the jury, look, this guy's a piece of garbage. We understand that. Worst guy, horrible father. He was involved with horrendous criminal activity, but he did not commit such and such crime. So
Well,
they almost
yeah,
have to tell the jury, look,
yeah.
don't use this against him. We know he's a piece of garbage.
Well, that's true. There's also a section in California's evidence code, section 1100 to 11 through 11.05. That says you can't use prior
Mhm.
acts by the defendant to indicate a character or a propensity that they did it again. Sometimes it gets in. There's a
Right.
couple of exceptions, by the way, and most of the time they're not going to let you talk about prior anything other than if the defendant takes the stand and testifies. They then open
Right.
themselves up.
And he's
If
open to
they
cross.
and usually it's if they raise character in any way. Prior felonies are admissible, by the way, unless there's a motion to exclude them.
Why people rarely.
Well, that's one of the reasons why you don't put somebody who's got a prior felony conviction.
Right,
You,
right.
you can make what we call in California a beagle motion. A beagle motion is basically to exclude reference to prior convictions because it's prejudicial, it's too
Mhm.
long ago, it's not the same. And those motions can be granted by the court. And I would think a lot of them should be.
Yeah.
Because the minute you tell somebody they got 3 prior grand thefts, and this is a grand theft case, what do you think the first
Right.
thought's going to be? So you want to make sure that the jury doesn't hear that unless one of the exceptions to the rule applies. And so they are entitled to a trial. Look, the people always speculated. I know from the time it happened, actually, that if O.J. Simpson had been tried in Santa Monica, where the crime should have been prosecuted,
Right.
the result would have been different. And
Mhm.
I think that's probably true. I don't know enough about the facts, but it's probably true. We do what people call forum shopping. That's what it's called. You know, Judge Jones over in Torrance is a heavy sentencer. And you know that Judge Smith in the same court is a very lenient censor.
Right.
So who do you want if you're the prosecution? Who do you want if you're the defense lawyer? You get one challenge for cause, and that's it. You got whoever else is left. It's the
Mhm.
same thing with jury selection. You have to pick which ones. Actually, it's not picking; it's unpicking. Because what
Right.
you do, you're looking at who you're going to get rid of, and it used to be a lot more loose. We used to be able to get license plates from the jury and check them out, find out what they had on the bumper stickers. We did lots of things those days. Can't do it anymore. It's all numbers.
Wow.
No more names. And so the unpicking of a jury is basically a gut, visceral feeling. I know people hire all these people to judge uh, who should they have and not have. And I'm not convinced that really works. I mean, even in certain cases where you don't want law enforcement people, certain cases you do. And
Mhm.
same thing with accountants and nurses in personal injury cases. You have to really be kind of intuitive. And you're wrong as many times as you're right. I can tell you
Hmm.
that.
That's
Because sometimes you
interesting.
say to yourself, what a jerk that guy was. I should have seen that coming. And you didn't. Sometimes you get a hanger, which is called one juror that hangs out. And you say, wow, I knew she was going to be stubborn. And it turned out to be right.
Yeah.
Big guessing game. You got to pick a lawyer that got a sense. Yeah, that's why you don't take somebody that's a brand new at the job. You know, the first
Right, right. You
case,
get what you pay for.
well, the first cases that I had after I left the DA's office, I was a little green. I was used to standing on the other side, you know, and you have to learn as you go. That's why experience really makes the difference
Mhm.
in selecting a criminal lawyer. Remember, your life's on the line.
Yeah,
So,
there are certain things you don't, scrimp on.
well,
Surgeons, your surgeon and your lawyer.
well, you know, I just want to mention one of the things that's really at the fore of this is the quote list end quote.
Mhm.
You think there's a list someplace?
Boy, at this point, we've been thrown so many red herrings and outright lies, and that I don't even know. I assume there is, based on what was being said before it became um, so dangerous for people. Oh, there's a list. Oh, all right, and what's her name there? Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yeah.
She seemed to hint that there's some kind of list of people. It's odd that we haven't heard any names, because there's apparently a lot of victims, but not many people that were doing the victimizing.
Well,
Um,
the argument is a reasonable argument, and the list may be relevant to some things, but may be misconstrued because it's naming people who may not have done anything except have dinner there. And when your name is included on a quote list, your reputation and everything else goes right down the toilet with it. And so that's one of the arguments. But
Right.
it seems to me, if she had, I'm talking as a prosecutor now, if she had anything that was worth anything, she'd have made a plea deal instead of getting 20
Right.
years. And so
Yeah.
I doubt whether there's anything. If she had something, she would trade it. That's a dream for a potential defendant, is to be able to say, I get immunity, or I get to go A, B, and C. This is what you're going to get in exchange. And
Yeah.
most criminals who have such things as lists anticipate something's going to happen. So they make copies and put it in safe places and say, if anything happens to me, Joe down the street is going to take care of this. And it's going to come out anyway. So I don't know whether there's a list or not. If you're fighting the hell out of the issue. And also, I interviewed Alan Dershowitz and David Schoen on my shows. I interviewed both of them, and those tapes actually are available. And both of them were Trump's attorney, Schoen was, and both of them represented Epstein.
Mm-hmm.
And both of them had seen him, I think, a few days before the event took place. And both of them said they don't think he committed suicide because he was upbeat. He was saying all these other things. Certain statements that were told to them are admissible. And the fact is, he says he had no motivation. He was looking forward to his trial, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
No reason. The last thing I want to talk about is physical evidence. We mentioned use of experts, in which is usually they bring in a forensic somebody or other, a handwriting guy or fingerprint person, or whatever it is, forensic, even though we've been deprived of the opportunity to see some of this because it wasn't preserved. But the experts have said that the physical findings militate against suicide. He could not have killed himself based on the physical findings. And this is coming from pathologists or whatever, including a guy that I knew from college, Cyril Wecht, who was one of the most famous pathologists in the country. He was also a lawyer.
Right.
He said same thing, not a suicide. You got forensic experts who have said the same thing, as well as Dershowitz and Schoen. So physically, I saw some clips that showed that his hyoid bone had been broken. And the statistics are that people who hang themselves, they don't do any damage to the hyoid, but some, very small number, which allows the jury to speculate. But they have to decide the credibility of that witness. And if that witness is credible and they are reputable and knowledgeable, that goes a long way. We're deprived of that here.
Right.
There's no preservation. I was surprised that there was an autopsy. They did actually show some of the physical manifestations. But the ultimate reality is some of the forensic people, have concluded that based on medical knowledge, this is not a suicide.
A lot of these suicides by hanging, people get this image in their head of a gallows, the floor falling out and wham, the
Right.
snapping of the neck. A lot of hanging suicides are purely asphyxiation. It has nothing to do with
Yeah.
breaking the neck or anything like that. The noose or whatever they're using is put around their neck. They slowly put their weight down on it, and either the blood flow or the air or both is cut off and leads to death. So yeah, that bone by the larynx being broken would be something you wouldn't normally see in one of these suicides where, somebody used a very short piece of sheet or rope or what have you, and they weren't falling from a height. They just put pressure on the vitals in their neck and checked out. So, yeah, that would lead me to believe that maybe there was more a choking that went on, a striking to the throat, things. And
We,
again, we just don't have that evidence.
we
Uh,
would have
by
had it on
Jonah.
those, we would have had it on those 3 minutes.
Right.
Whatever happened, whatever, I'm talking broadly, but the ultimate reality, one of the forensic people, I saw the clip, one of the forensic people said that they found him in a place he was sitting.
Hmm.
So the mechanism that people think about in hangings wasn't there. He basically was sitting, which is more conducive to somebody coming in and overpowering him and basically
Right.
choking him to death. And the hyoid bone would be broken in that kind of situation. These are all facts. And I wanted to
Mhm.
spend our time today going all over I'm calling them facts
Right.
because
Right.
I don't know what else to call them. And at this point, we don't know what's true.
No.
So the question, I've got a couple of quick closing questions. Who do you think did it?
Oof, boy, it could be anyone from whoever's at the top of the pyramid of the Illuminati down to, a disgruntled employee at Rikers. I mean, we really don't have a suspect here, any single suspect here. There are plenty of people with motive, but that depends again on this supposed list and he did a lot of he was a very famous guy. He had a lot of very rich, famous, and powerful people surrounding him. And any one of these people, maybe not literally put their hands around his neck, but could have arranged to have this guy put out of commission because the threat of the loss of their power, their reputation, their money, um, was too great. And that could have been a consortium of people. Maybe it was more than just one person. They said, look, we are in trouble. We need to take care of this problem. So I don't know, Judge. That's the toughest thing to answer. The who. You might know what group, what people that he was in, powerful people, but pointing your finger at any single person, wow, that's an impossibility.
Well, you have a lot of information today, so you can evaluate it as a representative of the public
Hmm.
and tell us what you think in addition to what you already have told us about. But the next, I guess, the final question is, what should be done about this, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, we always hear about independent investigations and people that aren't biased or people that don't have any skin in the game. I don't know if that type of bureaucracy can be found in this situation. Everyone seems tainted by this, whether they are or it's just the perception of being tainted by this. I mean, people are look. Trump is talking about Obama and the RussiaGate thing today, and all they say in response is, "Well, he's covering up for his involvement with Epstein." There's no solid evidence that Donald Trump was involved in any way, just like there's no solid evidence that anyone was involved. So the what do we do about it in a perfect world, Judge? Um, a very in-depth investigation into this guy, his doings, who was around him. There has to be solid evidence of wrongdoing by people that we know that are in very powerful places. But as long as they have the last word on what gets out and what doesn't, we're kind of stuck like we were with everything else. JFK, 9/11,
I was
RFK.
going to I was going to mention that. I was going to mention JFK. The facts are coming out now that there was a whitewash done in the
Yeah,
supposed
another
investigation, and these are supposedly done by reputable people. Warren
right.
was a very, very legitimate Chief Justice. I mean, to say he participated in this kind of thing is kind of pretty
Yeah.
serious accusation. But the real question is, why should we bother doing anything? The guy's dead. Nobody's being prosecuted. Does it really matter?
Well, it just kind of elevates this conspiratorial mindset that we have these days. Nothing's solved. It's left with a loose end. Americans don't like that. We like our movies and TV shows tied up in a nice bow at the end, and we like our conspiracies to be proven or disproven, and then we can move on. So this just perpetuates it. We're just keeping this going. It won't go away. It's always going to be there now unless something is done about it. So I think trusting in the government, our system of justice, is kind of imperative. We need to have an answer to this, or it's just going to sow more distrust and more conspiracy theories.
Well, do you know how most cases are resolved? You want to know the answer?
Someone opens their mouth.
That's right. Somebody flips. And you got these two guards. Somebody messed with that tape.
Yep.
Somebody decided not to do the film. They were told not to do it because it's not customary to not preserve a crime scene with
Right.
video especially. And so you have a lot of facts, maybe, but nothing to really tie them all together.
Yeah.
Are we going to spend more millions of dollars chasing what is really no longer relevant?
Right.
Or is it going to go to the dustbin, which is probably where Biden intended it to go?
Right.
And, it's like I interviewed the guy that had Hunter Biden's computer.
Yeah.
He was the guy that fixed it. And I actually interviewed him on my show. And the reality is there were some very damaging things that were on there that the public has never heard about. Why is that? Because somebody said this ain't going to be released.
Right.
And that's what's called bureaucracy. And people have motives, interests, and bias, which is another jury instruction, to do certain things. But unless somebody flips, I think this is a dead issue.
Yeah.
There'll be a lot of dialogue. It's a short news cycle. It'll be on people's minds for the next 3 months, and then we'll be off to some other issue. And part of what's doing right now, Obama and the Russians, and both sides are guilty of doing whatever the dirty tricks are. And I have had Roger Stone on my show, I think 5 times.
Roger's great.
Roger will tell you what really goes on, but the ultimate reality.
Why wasn't if Epstein was indeed murdered? Why is Ghislaine Maxwell still alive? You would assume she would know just as much or enough of what was going on that she would be a threat to the same people that would want to dispatch Epstein. So why, in your opinion, is she still kicking?
They must have figured out she doesn't know enough. There's not enough value. Otherwise, the DA would have offered her a deal.
Right.
So he didn't offer her a deal. It's kind of an implication or an inference that she doesn't know enough to make it worthwhile. And she may have known about things, but the source of her knowledge may not be admissible evidence.
Okay.
Unless she was standing there and saw it happening, whatever.
Right.
Then it's visual. That is obviously admissible evidence from personal observation. But the reality is, what do we gain, we as the public? What do we gain by pursuing this issue any further than it is, other than to come up with the conclusion that both the political parties are corrupt, which is absolute? I mean, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm pretty much always have been a neutral, moderate. I'm registered as independent. And the reality is they both do it.
Yep.
And they're getting worse at it.
Yes.
They have now artificial intelligence creating these stories. And I think what's going on with Obama right now is basically a distraction. It comes
Interesting.
It could have come up before or after.
Right.
All of a sudden, it's not. Roger Stone will tell you, and he did in his book, create a distraction. In fact, in robberies, oftentimes people are distracted by an accident a block away, gets everybody's attention.
Right.
I mean, it's not hard to imagine that's exactly what's going on. So somebody in the back room has decided we got to deal with this. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to create a distraction.
Everyone gravitates toward the distraction,
and the Democrats are
stop
just
paying attention.
absolutely the same. They
Yep.
do exactly the same. They're
Interesting.
just a bunch of crooks that are running everything. And
I agree.
I don't want to go on a soapbox about why we should change a lot of the things.
I agree,
But the reality is, system is not perfect.
No.
So anyway, I want to thank you again, Anthony. I
Always.
love having you on the show because it's so nice in the conversational part. So
I love it.
Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.
Absolutely. You're a good man, Judge. Have a good one, man.
Take care.